All right, let's dive right into this explainer and take a look at a football scoreline from 1957 that is honestly so absurd it feels like a permanent typo in the history books. We are talking about a match that totally transcended the sport. It stopped being just a game and morphed into this legendary, unmovable fixture in local folklore. It's a story about expectations being entirely shattered and how a very specific sequence of events on a pitch can literally echo for decades.
7-1. Now, if you know anything about the gravitational pull of the historic Old Firm rivalry in Glasgow, you know that 7-1 is definitely not just a statistic. These two numbers are a haunting, a taunt, and a permanent badge of honor all rolled into one. It is the reason why, even 70 years later, just yelling 7-1 across a pub table is enough to completely end a conversation, or, start a fight. It is a massive cultural artifact. So, to really unpack why this scoreline holds so much power, we're going to hit a few key areas. We'll explore the infamous Hampden in the Sun match, track this so-called October Revolution, look at the lasting legacy of the number 7, untangle some really funny global historical confusions, and finally, break down the actual psychology behind why 7-1 hits as hard as it does.
Let's set the scene and travel back to a crisp, golden October afternoon at Hampden Park in 1957. A day that fundamentally altered this rivalry forever.
Heading into this Scottish League Cup final, the contrast between the two sides was just staggering. On one side, you have Rangers. They are the heavy favorites, backed by unmatched wealth, absolute confidence, and just massive momentum. On the other side, Celtic, a club that was completely adrift. They were struggling heavily under some infamous board interference, even though they were managed by the legendary Jimmy McGrory. So fans walking into the stadium that day were fully expecting a grueling, gritty grind where the underdogs would just be fighting to survive.
But instead of that expected grind, the sun-drenched turf at Hampden witnessed what fans would forever immortalize as Hampden in the sun, a total revolution on the pitch. Celtic didn't just play football that day. They orchestrated a flawless, relentless offense. They came out absolutely firing. In minute 23, Sammy breaks the seal after they'd already hit the woodwork twice. By halftime, they've built a solid 2-0 lead. But after the break, the floodgates opened. The goals literally rained in. Billy McPhail secures a hat-trick, Neil Mochan adds a brace, and right at the absolute death in the 90th minute, Willie Fernie seals it with a penalty. 7-1. The Rangers' defense just vanished, and the sheer scale of the collapse actually led to clashes in the frustrated, disbelieving stands.
By the next morning, that brilliant, biting Glasgow humor had totally taken over the city. The joke was, what's the time? 7 past Niven, directly targeting Rangers' unfortunate goalkeeper, George Niven. But honestly, it went way beyond a few pub jokes. The humiliation was so profound, so deep, that Rangers center half, John Valentine, literally never played for the club again. Think about that. It was a career-ending, paradigm-shifting afternoon.
Which really brings us to the core question. Why does a single result from 70 years ago still matter so much today?
How does it remain the ultimate conversation ender in a city that's hosted thousands of derbies since? Well, it acts as an unbreakable shield. First off, it's the sheer margin of absurdity. It completely defies the usual tight, claustrophobic equilibrium of this rivalry. Second, it's the record itself. To this day, it remains the unbeaten record margin of victory in any major British domestic cup final. And third, it's a cultural anchor. Hampden in the Sun became a brand. It inspired books, poems, terrace chants. It permanently cemented itself into the supporters' identity. And this quote from Celtic captain Bobby Evans is just incredible. On the day, if it had lasted another 10 minutes, it would have been 10-1. It beautifully captures the black box of sports psychology, right? It reminds us of the sheer terror of what could have been. That day, absolutely everything clicked flawlessly for Celtic, and it entirely fractured for Rangers. It's a pure testament to what happens when momentum becomes an unstoppable physical force.
Now let's pivot for a second and look at a really fascinating meta layer to this whole story, specifically how fiercely local legends can create global historical confusion.
If you go online today and search for 1957 League Cup 7-1, you might actually get pretty confused by the results. Why? Because the English League Cup, what most people globally know today as the Carabao Cup, didn't even exist until the 1960-61 season. So this 7-1 folklore is strictly a Scottish anomaly, effectively acting as a ghost in global search engines.
But it turns out the numbers 7-1 aren't just a Glasgow anomaly. They echo all over the globe. The most famous modern example, of course, is the traumatic 2014 Brazil versus Germany World Cup semifinal, the Mining Arazo. Just a complete, shocking collapse of a national team on home soil. But football folklore is actually filled with these numbers. From historic 1905 club rivalry results that still dictate bragging rights, to various high-scoring 1950s regional derbies. Whenever 7-1 happens, it just seems to freeze time for the losing side.
So let's deconstruct that. Why are the numbers 7-1 uniquely sticky in our collective sports memory?
How does an anomaly of physics become a permanent identity? Well, first is the humiliation factor. 7-1 isn't just a loss. It signifies a total systemic failure. It's like you're playing against ghosts. Next is the goal-a-half rhythm. Scoring 7 goals implies a relentless, almost mechanical dominance that scars the viewer's memory way more than a narrow 1-0 or 2-1 thriller. And finally, cultural identity. It becomes an immortalized shorthand. It gets painted onto walls, chanted in stadiums, and passed down through generations.
So, the ultimate takeaway from all of this is that true history is forged in the totally unpredictable moments. It happens when the clock is ticking toward the inevitable, yet a team keeps pushing. They refuse to let up, even when the game is already won. The favorites might write the pre-match headlines, but the team that refuses to stop scoring, they write the history books.
It really makes you wonder about the butterfly effect of a single chaotic afternoon, doesn't it? If a simple string of numbers on the scoreboard can alter a major city's cultural identity for 70 years, what other historical anomalies have secretly rewritten the folklore of our world? I'll leave you to ponder that one.